Deep in the heart of Suffolk lies an ancient moated garden, an idyllic retreat created and cherished by a royal courtier, but abandoned for hundreds of years because of an act of high treason. The Lost Gardens team are now on their way. They've 5 days to delve into what is now a peaceful meadow, uncover the original garden's secrets, and restore it to its former glory.
Listen, let's just make sure we're in the right place.
Right, okay.
I've got a map reference.
Excellent.
Shelley Hall,
Shelley
moated
Hall,
site.
noted site.
Wood. Our reference is bang in the middle of that.
Carefully over the grid.
To put the garden back, we must find evidence of the original design. On my right is Dr. Twiggs Way, a landscape archaeologist, and she'll find clues to the original garden in the earthworks and buildings. Dr. Toby Musgrave is a plants and garden historian. He's looking for any surviving plantings that will help date the site and create a plant list. The discoveries will become the blueprint to put the Lost Garden back.
Where's the chimneys of the house?
Now, what sort of date would those say?
Tudor, I think, from first impressions.
Yeah.
They're really quite ornate as well, aren't they?
That's
There's your moat.
Oh, look, yeah.
Yeah.
Does the presence of the moat date it?
It gives it 2 possible dates, really. Again, it depends whether the house was originally in it or not.
Coat of arms on top of the windows there.
Coat of arms would really tie in with the manor house idea, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, these 2 yew trees seem fairly substantial. Off the top of your head, how would you date those?
They're very difficult to date, as we said, but I reckon those are sort of maybe 300-400 years old.
So 1600?
1600-ish.
That is the Lost Garden.
It's huge. Look at the size of this ditch.
That is a big moat.
It is. It's
Good
huge.
Lord, it's
Wow.
enormous.
Now, the fact that it's huge, does that mean anything?
It meant it cost a lot to make.
Okay.
It cost a lot to make, and it's been upkept. Because normally they just fill in, they silt in, they grass over, and they just kind of get smaller.
On the evidence of the site, there's not much there, is there? Now, what I want from you both, nevertheless, is a date.
Well, I'm going to give you 2 days.
No, I want 1 day.
If we decide we think we might have had an original house in here, then I would put probably around 1300
Okay.
for that. But the second date, when they become just garden features rather than houses to be lived in the centre, that would be about 1560, 1570.
Okay, what about you?
I'm going to go for 1550 because of the house, the way that the bridge is tied in. You've got the retaining walls here. The other thing I've noticed is the whole thing's flattened off to almost the level with the house, so this whole area
You see across it.
looks across it.
Now, if we want to verify those dates, what do you need to do?
I need to do 2 things. One is to try and find out more from documents and plans about the house and whether it's always been there, and whether the moat's always been there. And then we need to actually get going with what might be under the ground here.
Now, what about you? Anything for you on the site?
Nothing as far as the planting goes, with the exception of this yew hedge down the outside. No surviving planting. 2 things that would be useful. One would be a geophysical survey, which would show us if there was a house underneath here, which might give us Twiggs's earlier date.
You haven't got a lot of time, so you better get on with it.
Okay.
So, we have a rough mid-16th century date that Twiggs and Toby must now confirm as quickly as possible.
Coming out to the house, the most amazing thing about it is actually not where the house is, but where it isn't. There's this huge flat platform just where we were beginning to think there might be a missing bit of house. Toby was thinking that the door that leads to the moat is a bit odd having it at the end of the house. And as you come up, you can just see there's this huge kind of platform area, which is very obviously missing a bit of house.
We've set up the Lost Gardens database in the dining room of Shelley Hall. It holds a library of books from the Royal Horticultural Society and access to libraries and record offices all over Britain. Toby will start here.
OK, we've got 3 sources of records that were available to us. We've got the Suffolk County Record Office, the Kew Public Record Office, and Somerset House, which deals with all deaths and births. So I think we'll start with the Suffolk one as we're in Suffolk. Well, let's start with the only piece of information we have, which is the name of this place, which is Shelley. Excellent. 3 sources of information. Let's have a look at the Suffolk subsidy. Let's see what we've got here. So this is a list of taxpayers and their residences in 1523. See if we can find Shelley on here. No, there's no Shelley there.
Anne-Marie Powell is our garden landscaper. It's her job to plan and supervise the reconstruction of this garden, based on Twiggs and Toby's findings, and she wants to get going.
Well, to be honest, I know this is a restoration, but for me, virtually everything on this site has got to go.
What do you mean, everything?
Well, we need to get the turf off for starters.
Well, you just go steady on that because we want to do a geophysical survey, so you can't take the turf off
Right.
until I say.
OK. Well, there's lots of other things that we can get rid of. All of these plantings that have been put in by the owners at the moment, the Scots, they're no good to us, are they? They're out. We also need to have a look in the moat. We don't want to disturb any wildlife, so we'll get an environmental consultant in.
Yeah.
And we definitely need to get rid of that poplar Monty.
I mean, that's a big tree, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's leaning and it's going to be very dangerous.
Right.
That has to go.
OK.
And that bridge is not going to hold my machinery. We've got to get another way of getting the machinery onto this island. And that's the best place for it. Drop in a temporary bridge.
But that's almost the widest part of the moat.
Well, that's going to be the best place for it. We can't get through this way, can we? And all of the road is coming down here, so it's ridiculous to put it anywhere else.
So we're talking about big stuff here.
Big bridge for big machines.
Big machines will tear up precious grass getting to the bridge, so to cross the turf we'll need a hard-wearing track. And you don't get much more hard-wearing than these aluminium panels. Over 400 metres of them.
The diamond pattern on the brickwork is the same over there as it is here, so those were built at the same time. But then
At the back of the house, Twiggs and I noticed some intriguing extensions to the original building.
And look at the way that wall comes
Yeah.
straight through that window. Clearly a later wall.
So, I mean, what you have is a mixture of buildings and dates, but the fundamental building is
Was massive.
colossal. Yeah.
Absolutely, especially if you remember there's probably another part to it.
Yeah.
And so that's incredibly ostentatious in style. Depending quite which decades we're going to get into, it might be a period where if it's new money, they really want to show it.
Now, what does that tell you about the date?
I think it's giving us really an Elizabethan feel to it. So a few decades on from what we originally thought, maybe in the 1580s.
As the track continues to grow, Anne-Marie has started her survey. She's measuring the dimensions and levels of the site to draw up a scale plan, which will help her work out the quantities of materials she needs and what they will cost.
Yeah.
Twiggs decides that the church we passed earlier, just 100 yards from the house, might be the family chapel, and therefore hold invaluable clues.
Look at that. Fabulous. This is the one that's over the door. We've got the griffins. Now, the griffins are going to be a real key. That's going to be the family coat of arms. So I'm going to need somebody to look at heraldry for me so that we can find out some more. Oh, fantastic. Just what we wanted, a monument. This tomb was made by Philip Tilney, Esquire, in remembrance of his duty to his dear mother, Dame Margaret. And this must be her, Dame Margaret. Oh, wow. She doesn't look very happy. So we've got the Tilney family, and in fact, let's be honest, it goes on to list hundreds of them. I mean, the important thing is his father living 1598. So we've got a date, a 16th century date for Philip Tilney, Esquire.
Aha. Shelley spelt a different way here. And the great thing here is it actually gives us a name of the man who owns this place, Mr. Philip Tilney. So let's see if we can take that a stage further. Let's see if we can keyword in Tilney. Nope, nothing new on that. Let's try a slightly different spelling, because that sometimes they change Y's for I's. Ahaha! A feat of fines. 1517, so we're getting an even earlier date. So let's see what the feat of fines has to tell us. My word. Gobbledygook. It's the earliest date so far, 1517, so let's go through this. It says it's a registration of the transfer of land between the Elmer family and a group of trustees for the Tilney family. So we've got the family name, and this relates to the site here, I think. Yep, there we've got Shelley, and Shelley referred to there. So it looks as if the Tilney family got this garden in 1517.
So records show an early Tudor garden, but is there any scientific evidence for this?
We're using electrical resistance here to measure different moisture in the ground.
And the result of that is?
Well, where you've got more moisture, it often means that you've got pits or a ditch or something like that. And where you've got less moisture, it quite often reflects the fact that you've got a buried wall or a foundation or maybe a path.
And that'll all be shown on the plan.
That's right. What we're doing is that we're taking readings over the whole of the site here at half-metre centres, and from that we will get a plan of what lies underground.
Toby has had a breakthrough. A very early survey of the site.
The Manor of Shelley, 1519. The site of the Manor of Shelley, as it is built, set and lieth in Shelley, within the park of Shelley. That is to say, in the east part of the same park, with a garden on the east side of the same site of the manor, which garden is built with stews and ponds, and it is also moated on every side, and a dove house is built on the south side of the said stews and ponds. So we've got a moated site, and I think what we can say is from this description is that the garden to the east here, the moated area, is definitely the garden that we're looking at. We've got stews and ponds, which we haven't got any evidence of yet, but we can find that, I'm sure. We've got a dovecot, but we're not sure where that is. But I think the most important thing about this piece of evidence is that it shows we're definitely in the right area.
We can now really start to visualise our garden, surrounded by a moat with stew ponds on it to keep fish in for the kitchen and possibly a dovecot. But back to the immediate task, and the poplar is Anne-Marie's first casualty. But the moat itself could be a problem. Any project that could potentially disturb the wildlife in a waterway has to be given an official environmental all-clear.
Now, what are we looking for in the moat?
Primarily amphibians. At this time of the year, it could be a breeding site for several different species. There could be common frogs and common toads in here. There's probably the common newts or smooth newts, and possibly great-crested newts, which are the rare ones.
What would happen if you did find a great-crested newt?
It would stop everything. They've got special protection under the law, and therefore...
What do you mean it would stop everything?
You wouldn't be able to interfere with the site or handle the animals without a licence from English Nature.
Which could be months, if not
Oh,
years.
yes, it'd probably be about August.
Well, do you think there are any in there?
No, I don't think so. I haven't seen any sign of them.
How long will it take before you can give us a cast-iron guarantee that there'll be nothing in here?
Well, a good walk round looking into the shallow water at this time of the year, and I should be able to see adult newts quite easily.
All right, well, you do that, and then let us know as soon as you know.
So we must wait for the environmental thumbs up. But preparations for landscaping are almost finished. The temporary road is nearing the moat. Anne-Marie's survey is about done, and the geophysical results are being analysed. And the owners of Shelley Hall, Andrew and Tessa Scott, are about to get some very exciting news.
Twigs.
Hi.
Andrew. Toby.
Hi.
Andrew. Now, we have got a date for your garden.
Yep, we've pinned it down to 1519. It was first created, so considerably earlier than we first thought when we walked up the drive.
Extremely early.
1517, I believe, the land was purchased by the Tilneys, and in that intervening 2 years, they built the house and put the garden in.
Yeah. All in one.
Everything together.
Everything together, so it goes together very visually. So what we can really do now is, because you've still got such a superb house, if we put back the garden of the same period, it's still going to look fantastic because it's still going to look together.
Well, that's the theory. But life is rarely that straightforward.
Can I interrupt? But we do seem to have got some interesting results coming through now from the geophysics.
That's the
Geophysics. Yes, black lines there are the areas of higher resistance, which we think, are either paths or possibly structures. More likely paths if it was a historic garden.
It would be fantastic if this was our plan, because then we could get going. But
Now, you two, have a look at this.
My word!
Oh, wow. Is that the geophys, yeah?
That's the geophysical survey.
Here's the bridge.
Right.
So that comes across there, and you can see we've got these quadrants.
Excellent.
Very Tudor.
Well, it ties
Absolutely.
in with your Tudor
Yes.
idea, but what do you make of this line here and that line there, and these are obviously paths or enormously wide walls.
Yeah. I mean, it ties in with the idea that we were talking about earlier on, about this being a site which might have had a medieval house on it.
Absolutely, because we're seeing both of the phases on the same one plan. And so we could be seeing the earlier house and then the later Tudor garden.
Yeah, I think we definitely need an archaeological report just to make sure that's it.
And if the archaeological survey says that we have two conflicting gardens of equal interest, is that going to be a problem?
We'd have to stop. It could stop us.
Really?
Yes, really.
Well, they do say curiosity killed the cat. The geophysical evidence of two possible historic gardens on our site means us moving out and the Suffolk archaeological team moving in. And Anne-Marie is getting increasingly anxious about the time. But while we're waiting, there is another way to search for a garden plan.
Ted, are you
Yeah.
finding anything?
Yes, I think I am. I'm on the line of the hedge that used to enclose this garden.
How do you know it's a hedge? I mean, it could be, I don't know, pillars or paving or something.
Well, supposing this were a wall going down here, I would have a constant signal. My stick would continue to be held up. Actually, as I walk along, it is an intermittent one.
There it goes.
There it goes again, you see. And that is where the actual plants of the hedge were planted.
How does it work? I mean, how does this thing actually happen?
It's working in that sensors in my wrists, my heels, etc., pick up the differences in magnetic field. A message goes to the brain and it sends a message down to your hands. This corresponds to the magnetometry. So you're getting things that show a change in magnetic field.
So you're going to go over the whole site and mark it out, either mentally or physically, and you're going to end up with a plan, aren't you?
That would be the idea.
We have some excellent news about the great crested newts. There aren't any, which I think is a shame personally, but it's good for the project. Now we wait on tenterhooks for good news from the excavation.
Now, what does this show us?
Right, it shows that we're down to something meaningful, that there's some real archaeology on the site, that the top level isn't real archaeology in a sense, that we know from the owners that they dump material on the top from the last moat cleaning.
And these would be part of that
That's
debris,
right, this
would they?
rubble
Yeah.
and this dark soil is all really quite recent. So we don't have to worry too much about that, but this is real archaeology at the bottom, and it looks like a path, a gravel path, which lines up with the bridge, which fits in with what's on the geophysical plan. Looking at that way, that's the path there, leading to something there,
Right.
which is different, which appears to be a structure.
And what does that appear to be?
That one was probably a 19th century clay drain, and that's probably what's showing up there. So that could be another path, possibly another path.
But what we really need to know is, can we go ahead with the restoration of the garden without damaging what's there?
With care, yes. That you have leeway of, say, about 20 centimetres, which we know is modern rubble, and therefore anything you do in that is not going to damage anything. If you go down as far as 30 centimetres, we're hitting the real archaeology. You can't.
So we keep it in this topsoil, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
So we can get on.
You can get on, yes.
Brilliant.
So we're back in the game. The real business of reconstructing Sir Philip Tilney's 16th century garden can begin. But it's 6 hours later than expected, and the first of our 5 days has come and gone with precious little progress.
They're stripping the turf off, lifting it, but the light is fading fast because it's the end of the day. It seems to have been an enormously long one, but we've learnt a lot and work is going on.
Very early morning on the site of what we now know to be the 16th century moated garden of Sir Philip Tilney. We're desperate to catch up. All this turf stripping should have been done yesterday. The 45-foot temporary bridge is on schedule. It's made its way down our aluminium track and is ready to drop into place.
What What amazes me about this is that in medieval times, the people building this garden would have dug it by hand using wooden tools. Now we've got this heavy-side machinery to come and bring in trucks and trucks of all the materials that we need. We're quite privileged, actually.
Well, the bridge is in place. Now all Anne-Marie needs is a plan from Twigs and Toby.
You know, I'm really wanting
You've got to do
start.
something.
OK, let's just recap what we've got. We've got a date.
1519.
Right. We've got a name.
We've got the Tilneys.
And we know that he bought the ground in 1517
Yeah.
Yep.
and made a new house.
And a new garden.
And we know that he made a new garden on this moated site. We're certain of that. Now, let
Yeah.
me show you something you haven't seen, because the Dowser did a report.
Oh, right.
Now, what do you make of that?
My word, he found a lot.
He did, didn't he? He got a lot of information, more than we got from the geophysics.
Ah, there's the ponds.
Stew ponds at the back end. He's also got in here, I don't know if you noticed, a hedge. Every single item of the hedge, he doused every single plant. What do you make of that?
Well, a hedge would certainly be in keeping with that period, that kind of garden. So I think a hedge would be a good addition to this plan.
But do you notice what he isn't on his drawing?
Yeah, we haven't got that square central
He's got some
piece.
statue bases, and given that it's a very compacted chalk and tile there, he might have thought they were statue bases.
OK, what have we got here that we can give to Anne-Marie that she can actually get going with?
Surely you've got to
The
do
paths.
Right, draw this on the
Yeah,
map.
Right.
Yeah,
Put this
so we're
on the
going to
map.
have them. This is going to be very rough, but
Now, you've got your building in the middle.
We're going to have to definitely keep that.
Now, you know that there are going to be stew ponds probably down this
There.
end, here and here. Can you get on without knowing any more detail?
oh
than that?
yeah, absolutely. This gives me a start, so we can get this scaled up, marked out, and make
One
a start.
point.
Yes.
Get on your digger.
But no marking out can happen until all the turf is removed. And for a strict reconstruction of our 1519 garden, the yew hedge should come up too.
Well, yews are wonderful. I mean, they're such an old and long-growing tree.
I mean, they're a lovely thing, and we don't want to get rid of them, but they're going to be an excellent windbreak for our eventual garden, whatever we put
Absolutely.
in. So I'd like to actually chop them down to about 10 foot, and they're going to regenerate.
Yeah.
So that's going to give us a shield for the garden. And I don't really think that we should be chopping down trees just because they don't fit into the place.
I mean, they're
really,
not
in
original
time.
as part of the Tudor garden.
So can I get the arbor workers going?
Yeah,
Good.
take them down to about 10 feet and they'll grow up again.
The arb workers, or tree surgeons to you and I, cut back the lower branches of the yew to encourage regrowth. In a couple of years, this will be a dense hedge and an invaluable windbreak for our new garden. The cuttings must be meticulously cleaned up because they're highly toxic. The owners, horses and dogs could be killed if they chewed on these branches. "20 volunteers from Writtle College have come to help today, and there's plenty for them to do. Now the site is beginning to be cleared of trees and turf, the team need to decide on the garden's structures. Let's get this straight. We've got to sort it. First thing, dovecot. Do we have a dovecot?
Well, we've got archive evidence for one, but we don't have any specific evidence to locate it in the garden or outside the moat.
The other thing is, I think perhaps the owners would come into this, because a garden feature is one thing. To suddenly land somebody with a dove house with fully functioning doves
doves.
is something that you really have to, they have to be keen on doves.
But there is a building. We're none the wiser.
I'd like it to be, well, not too grand, though. I think if it was something really, if it was a banqueting house, it would be on that survey.
So we decide on a simple timber structure which will eventually be covered in climbing plants.
I mean, the other thing that was really sort of popular, although it was a medieval feature, was a maze. I mean, they had their religious significances, but again, they're sort of ornamental rather than utilitarian, so they were there just purely to be enjoyed.
As you came into the garden, would there be anything there in the form of a gateway or an archway or anything like that?
I think there would have been archways. I'm
An
pretty sure there would have
entranceway
been.
to
Yeah.
it. We've talked all the while about it being an enclosed garden with hedge. And so you had an alignment of gates through one into the inner courtyard, through another into the area of the garden and then through another again. You're just emphasising time and time again, going through more private areas, opening up the doors and seeing the secrets inside.
Now the structures are decided, Anne-Marie needs to get them drawn onto the plan.
Well, that's all fine and good, but does it do much more than a nice hand-drawn picture?
Yeah, this is a fantastic bit of kit, and we've got Adam in to help us use this CAD, so I can know exactly the quantities of materials we need, and I get a plan that I can then mark out in the garden.
Now, the one thing that's missing from there that they talked about was having all the walks covered with tunnels.
No way, you're joking. We can't do that. We can put in a little bit, but we just haven't got the time or the money to do that.
All right.
So a nut tunnel at the entrance to mark where you go into the
And
garden.
you're happy to work off that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Anne-Marie wastes no time in getting in her orders, and by mid-afternoon they're starting to arrive. 12,000 metres of turf, 85 cubic metres of topsoil, 250 metres of landscape fabric to line the paths, plus 60 tonnes of gravel for the pathways. Gravel was practical choice for ground cover in the centuries before lawnmowers. We're laying turf as well, and before it goes down, the lumpy soil over the whole area must be raked to a fine tilth.
What Richard's doing here is he's raising the sides of our stew ponds. We don't want to go deep down to actually disturb the remains of the archaeology below. What we're going to do then is we're going to line it with a waterproof membrane. Traditionally they would have used clay, but clay's far too expensive and it'll take us ages.
And the last job of the day is to mark out the paths by edging them with timber. So, at the end of day 2, the site is clear. The ponds are taking shape, and tomorrow we must get cracking on those structures. Morning of day 3. Twiggs sneaks back to the Tilney family chapel with Dr. Robin Macpherson, who's come to interpret the heraldic symbolism inside the church.
Well, the griffin's a really important heraldic beast. It's half eagle, half lion. It's quite a normal heraldic symbol, very prominent in the Tudor period.
Right.
And so it's a supporter for the shield. And the shield bears the heraldic arms.
And I see that we've got the griffins again in this top left-hand corner.
That represents the main family shield. And here we have the griffins again,
Right.
symbolising the Tilney coat of arms. And what the other parts of the shield that aren't griffins show is that they've intermarried with another family, in this case the Thorpes.
So most of the church is actually a lot earlier than the Tillneys.
Yes, this is the estate church, and most of the tower is 12th, 13th century.
Oh.
It was here long before the Tilneys were.
Right.
But when we get past the tower,
We've got this fantastic red brick structure.
absolutely, this was built by Philip Tilney, the same person that built your manor house a little way up the road.
And actually, I mean, you can really see that, can't you? Because we've seen stuff like this on the hall. We've seen exactly the same kind of detailing.
That's it, just
And
in
he's
case
even
you're in
got-
any doubt, there's a coat of arms up there, just to link it back to what we saw. He was a staunch Catholic, and he built this chapel at the same time as he changed the manor house to show his power, to show his money, and to show, most of all, his dedication to God. What's also interesting about it is because the family was Catholic, they lived through Henry VIII's Reformation. They would have changed with the times and become Protestant.
Although Sir Philip converted to the Protestant faith, 3 generations later, his great-great-grandson, Charles Tilney, made the dangerous conversion back to Catholicism. He became involved with a Catholic conspiracy later called the Babington Plot. He and his fellow conspirators planned to kill Queen Elizabeth I in order to crown Mary Queen of Scots, who was the Catholic choice for the throne. The plot was discovered while the men were still planning their attack. In September 1586, Charles Tilney was tried and convicted of high treason and hung, drawn and quartered the day before his 25th birthday. Was this the family disgrace which caused our garden to fall into ruin? Back in the garden, Anne-Marie's got her team onto the back-breaking job of clearing weed from the moat. Despite all our hard work yesterday, the site doesn't look much different yet, which is very dispiriting, but now it should really start to take shape. All those main structures must be built today, and the first of those is the tunnel that will lead onto the garden. It's being made with traditional Tudor techniques, lashing hazel together with flexible whips of willow. And now, with something to show for our efforts, I feel brave enough to take Tessa, the owner, onto the garden to reassure her that the operation is going to plan.
Well, it is larger than I thought it was going to be. There are more people and more machinery than I ever thought there would be.
Talking machinery, when did you last dredge the moat?
That was about 86, but it was never as full as when I was a child.
Well, we've just come under what will be the nut walk.
Oh yes, I think that's a lovely idea.
You've got the central path here, an entrance into the garden, this wide path. And you've got to get this idea of a medieval garden. You come into an enclosed space.
Yes, yes, that's
so
what I gather.
So this is a retreat. That's going to be a maze.
Oh, well, that's a very good idea.
A simple one.
Wonderful.
Here, you're going to have raised beds, which is actually purely medieval.
Yes,
it's
that's
not
right.
Elizabethan.
No, right.
And they'll be raised beds. They'll grow herbs for strewing in the hall, herbs for cooking, flowers, medicinal herbs. You know, the whole. One has to get inside the head of the medieval mind, where that was their boots, that was their chemist.
Yes.
Gerald's Herbal, this is 1597.
Talking about herbs, Toby is putting a plant list together using books from the Royal Horticultural Society's library. And of course, he can only select plants that would have been available to Sir Philip Tilney in 1519.
Ah, saffron, that's nice. That's autumn flowering crocus, which is colchicum, which is used for saffron, as you said, for cooking. What else have we got? What have we got here? Ah, tobacco. That's the henbane of Peru. That's definitely can't go in the garden because that's too late. That's a later introduction. OK, let's try another book. This one's a bit more of our period. This is the Flowers and Trees of Tudor England, which is much more to our liking, I think, for this garden. And I know this book has some absolutely beautiful sketches of the plants of the day. We've got Aphrodil, which is an early name for daffodils. And again, unfortunately, it's a bit early flowering for our summer garden. But what else have we got in here? I mean, it's just a joy to read through these books and just look. We've got gillyflower or dianthus or pink, hemp, cannabis sativa. I think we might give that one a miss, although it was great at the time, not only for its beautiful foliage, but for making ropes and maybe for recreational use, I don't know. But I don't think we could get away with growing that one today.
It's midday on day 3. The fish ponds are coming on nicely, and Anne-Marie's applying a 20th century solution to an age-old problem.
This stuff isn't very Tudor, but the Scots have asked for an easily maintainable garden. So we're laying down mypex, and literally that's just a landscape fabric that stops all the weeds coming through into the gravel path. You can even use it in your border. It's brilliant stuff.
I'll pull it now because it's tight.
Yeah, it's nice and tight. Okay. Now we need to peg it down before it blows away.
By 2 o'clock, we're ready to fill the fish ponds. We've covered the bottom in sand to stop any sharp stones piercing the liner. The Tudor clay method did have its advantages. A stew pond is a holding tank for the kitchen. In Sir Philip's time, it was considered very prestigious to be able to serve fresh fish to your guests. The Tilneys would have bred carp in large ponds outside the moat or even in the moat itself. When a big banquet was planned, staff would catch as many fish as they needed and store them in these 2 ponds.
Right, this is the bottom left-hand quadrant. Let me tell you what we're going to do here. Over on the left-hand side here, we've got the monastic beds. These are very rectangular, they're very formal, they're the old style, late medieval, early Tudor. And what we're doing down in this area here is we're going to put the new knot gardens in. Now, everybody thinks of knot gardens as these very formal, very intricate designs, but at the time that this garden was created, they were very simple. They were squares divided by cross quarters.
The inspiration for our beds have come from a 1577 book called The Gardener's Labyrinth. Although it was published later than our garden, the fashion of knots may well have preceded it, and Sir Philip, as a royal courtier, would have been certain to want a cutting-edge garden design. It's 5 o'clock on day 3, and the team have got to get the 60 tons of gravel spread onto the paths. Each one of these mini tippers holds only 1/10 of a ton. It's not going to get finished today. The central structure is finally going up, but we haven't finished all the constructions we hoped. With only 48 hours left, the raised beds aren't finished, the paths are incomplete, and the maze hasn't even started yet. The weary team are looking at a tough day's work tomorrow, so they can catch up. We're 4 days into our 5-day restoration of the 1519 moated garden in Shelley Hall, Suffolk. To stay on schedule, we must get all the hard landscaping finished today in preparation for tomorrow's planting. Toby's knot bed design is proving tricky for the carpenters. These beds should be filled with topsoil and manure by now.
There was a moment yesterday when all the machinery went off and there was a total air of tranquility descended on Shelley. And it really started making me imagine how Sir Philip must have felt coming back to Shelley and his manor here. He was a small courtier and spent most of his time in London sucking up to the noblemen there. And when he got back to Shelley, he was lord of the manor. He was the main man. He employed most of the people in the area, and of course he had people developing and building his new garden. And he would have loved it.
The carpenters have finished the rectangular beds, and the landscapers are shoveling in manure from the owner's stables. They're mixing it up with the 85 cubic metres of topsoil. This sort of raised bed was first used in medieval monasteries. They were a purely functional invention which put plants at an easy level to tend and no plant out of reach for watering. The beds would have been surrounded by a hard-wearing cover such as gravel. We've been laying this gravel for 3 days and it still feels like we're never going to finish the job.
We've come to the end of any earth disturbance that we're going to do now. We've always stuck within the 20 centimetres that the archaeologists gave us. And the exciting thing is that we found nothing. So the only garden that was ever here is that 16th century one that's still here, 30 centimetres below the ground, completely undisturbed.
It's 2 o'clock.
Okay, this is the bottom right-hand quadrant, and in this quadrant we're putting the maze. We mentioned this earlier, and what we're going to do is we're going to use hyssop as the plants to define the maze. We've had to compromise here a bit because at the time mazes would be flat grass into which you cut out your pattern, but the lady of the house here didn't want that because they're much harder to maintain than a raised maze. So what we're going to do is we're going to use hyssop planted at 30 centimetre spacings, and we're going to have a circular maze leading to the centre. The whole idea of mazes at this time was this arrival at sanctuary, at this arrival at salvation. You went through life, life was a maze, you had to walk round, find your way through, and at the end of this you arrived in heaven.
To stop the maze becoming a weed hell for the owners, we're lining it with landscape fabric.
We're starting off to measure the maze, doing it in circles, starting at the smallest one, and just work our way around ever-increasing circles.
Even on day 4, fascinating new information is coming to light. Twiggs has found a document which confirms that, just as we suspected, Shelley Hall itself has been radically altered since Tilney's time.
What's quite nice about this is this tiny little detail of the hall itself. Shows
Well,
quite
it's not
a lot
just
of...
tiny little detail, it's absolutely riveting because it shows it as it was before it was knocked about. Absolutely fascinating because that's pre-demolition, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this side of the wing's gone, obviously. There's nothing joining on, but it's before they built in this area here.
What a shame they changed
I
it.
know.
It's so much nicer like that.
But there's some detail on the map.
Right.
There's a bit more detail on the avenues.
I see it doesn't show the bridge on that.
No, if there'd been something fantastic in here, details of division and pathways, they might have shown it. Usually in the contents it would say something like pleasure gardens instead of just gardens.
So we can assume that certainly by 83, there was no trace of a medieval garden.
No, and I think that's more or less what we've confirmed from an awful lot of our raking and general soil movement at the moment.
It's the end of the day and we've made good progress. All the structures are in place and it's a real psychological boost for the landscapers and volunteers to get the turf going down today. It means that tomorrow we can focus on attention to detail and enjoy the planting.
Well, this is really what it's all about, because for all the landscaping in the world, doesn't matter how clever it is, if you haven't got plants, you're not going to have a garden. And we've got a lot, hundreds of them, but you'll notice they're very small indeed, because we're not interested in instant results. We want to make a garden that will grow as well as possible with small, healthy plants and last, well, another 400 years if we can. And all of these plants, pre-1519, most of them very recognisable and familiar indeed. There's Angelica over there next to honeysuckle. Well, we've got Santolina, rosemary, lavender, Alchemilla mollis, dianthus, iris, roses. Not many roses because most of them were introduced much later. We've got hyssop for the maize. But the critical thing is to get them in the ground, because if we don't, well, the whole week's work is wasted.
What we're planting now is going to give us loads of colour, because if there's one thing the Tudors loved, it was an absolute riot of colour.
The Tudor knot beds will be planted quite formally. On the north and south sides, we've interplanted dianthus and valerian. These are dry-loving rock plants and so perfect for the exposed raised beds. We're planting them 8 inches apart, but by the summer, this bed will be a mass of deep reds and dusty pinks.
All the plants are in position now. They're all spaced at exactly the same distance apart along the lines of the maze. And just look at it for a moment, because I think it looks brilliant as it is. Any second now, we've got to start planting, which means pots everywhere, mud, cuts in the mypex. But as it is, I think it looks perfect.
250 plants are used for the maze, and we're planting them 1.5 feet apart. These little hyssop plants will grow to at least 1 foot high by summer, but right now they're all but invisible, and we're just left with the mess. The last of the gravel will dress the maze, and the pots they came in now make perfect crash helmets for the delicate seedlings. The rectangular raised beds are to be a spectacular medieval mixture of planting. Chives, pasqueflowers, achillea, campanula, artichokes and a huge variety of herbs, all planted for a gentle, informal effect.
How's the planting coming along?
It's okay. I tell you, it's changed from archaeology. At least I get to put some things in the hole.
Instead of digging them out.
I know.
My favourite thing about this whole project is that the maze there, so crisp on the drawing, is just a hint of what it will be. It's not a sort of cheap, quick fix.
I think one of the responsibilities I've been given for this garden are the fish ponds over there, the stew ponds, where traditionally they took the fish out of the local river or moat and put it in the stew ponds, which had a sort of shale bottom, so the fish became cleaner. And obviously, they had to be clean before they could eat it. I think it's amazing what's been achieved in 5 days. And as far as I can see, everyone smiled throughout it. Because it's also got me for the first time in a long time on my knees in a garden. But I'm going to really enjoy it. It's going to be a big treat.
I think it's lovely, actually. I was slightly nervous at times, and I kept looking at pictures of what it might be and not really knowing what it should be. But I think it's very nice. And I don't think it'll be too much weeding, I don't think, anyway. And people won't believe us when we say that it appeared in such a short time.
Only 5 days ago, this moated field concealed a mystery waiting to be solved. The lost garden below the surface is finally emerging. The team has used modern science and historic documents to recreate Sir Philip's original plan. Now, enclosed within a hawthorn hedge, we have pathways, raised beds, fish ponds and a maze. All this garden needs now is lots of water and a warm summer. We can only imagine what Sir Philip Tilney's garden looked like in the summer of 1519, but it's likely that it reflected the atmosphere of peace and stability that the Tudors had brought to England. Sir Philip may have planted Santolina. The cotton lavender was popular for its bright summer hues. He might have enjoyed the bold pinks and reds of the valerian. He would certainly have used the roots to make a medicine for the pestilence. But it's colour, opulent colour, which brings this garden to life. The tiny hyssop has sprung up, and now we can see our maze, a route to salvation traced in the gravel. Eventually, these plants will grow to 60 centimetres and fill out into a thick, fragrant low hedge with blue flowers. The turf around Sir Philip's fish ponds has settled into a soft meadow. It's easy to imagine how the Tilneys' kitchen would have relied on this garden. And in the central arbour, the hops used for brewing are starting to take hold. And these hazel trees one day will cover this tunnel with boughs of nuts. The extraordinary thing is that this garden doesn't feel like a museum piece. It's as alive at the turn of the 20th century as it was almost 500 years ago.
Lost Gardens returns next week. Coming up tonight, join James O'Loughlin for the spectacular grand final of The New Inventors, 8:30 tonight on ABC One.